It's a body whose work touches and affects most of us on a daily basis. In a country with a rampant crime crisis, we are all bound to encounter the work of the National Prosecuting Authority one way or another. As accused persons, if you happen to find yourself in that position, accused of a crime, as victims of crime and families of victims, if you are unfortunate and find yourself in that position. But for most of us, as the people part of their creed that says lawyers for the people. As recent experience has shown, for many of us, our notions and senses of the effectiveness and the efficiency of the criminal justice system is significantly tied in alongside what is happening within the National Prosecuting Authority, its ability to prosecute without fear, favor, on behalf of the people in this country. And there's no doubt that one of the biggest pain points as far as South Africans are concerned is a general sense among many that sadly in our country, crime, especially commercial crime and corruption, is rampant, and the question of whether or not enough is being done to ensure that crime does not pay, as the old adage goes, that crime does not pay. But is that generalized sense of feeling that in some instances crime does pay, in the sense that people are not held to account, is it backed up by reality though? What is the work that is actually being done to try and make sure that that creed that says crime does not pay is lived reality? That is the central question that we'll be trying to answer over a number of episodes of this brand new podcast series that is brought to you by the National Prosecuting Authority. Welcome to the premiere episode of Graft Under Watch, a podcast that is brought to you, as I say, by the National Prosecuting Authority. I'm Thulasizwe Semelane, and I'm here to facilitate the conversation between the National Prosecuting Authority and you, the people, in that mantra of lawyers for the people. So I'm joined for this first episode by the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batohi, as well as the head of the Assets Forfeiture Unit of the National Prosecuting Authority, Advocate Omar Rabaji Rasitaba. They join me for this conversation. Thank you for coming through, and it's good to be with you, the both of you.
Thank you, Thulas. Good to be here.
We're going to start with an overall outline of why this podcast and the state of the National Prosecuting Authority, and for that, we'll start with you, National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Batohi. So I think let me start firstly with that question that says, why is this a project that is worth doing for the NPA?
So, the NPA, as you mentioned in the introduction, is a critical constitutional entity in South Africa. And for any strong democracy, you need to have a strong, competent, capable National Prosecuting Authority. And the reason why we thought it's important to do this is to try to show the public exactly what the work of the NPA is all about, but to be also candid and frank about what has been achieved in the past 5 years since I took office, what are the challenges that we face, but at the end of the day, to really show to the people of this country the important work that the prosecuting authority is doing every day in terms of trying to bring a level of justice to thousands of victims of crime every day, but also to reflect very candidly on what, as I said, the challenges have been, particularly with regard to dealing with specific types of corruption in this country.
Yeah, we'll get into the further details and on this particular episode with the head of the AFU around assets forfeiture as a component of the work that you do. Mm-hmm. But I want us to start with an overall discussion about the state of the National Prosecuting Authority. You've been in office now for 6 years and nearing the end of your term of office. How would you characterize and describe the state of the National Prosecuting Authority as an instrument in the fight broadly against crime, but specifically against commercial crimes, complex crimes, as well as organized crime?
So when I took office, it's past 6 years now, the state of the National Prosecuting Authority then was pretty dismal. I think people had lost complete faith in the ability of the national director to in the ability of, well, the NPA broadly, to truly do its work without fear, favor, or prejudice, as the Constitution requires us to do. At that time, the NPA was part of a state capture project, let's put it that way, or certain people in the NPA, because I hasten to add that the majority of prosecutors have been and continue to be dedicated, capable public servants that want to only bring justice to the people. But of course, there were certain parts of the NPA that was seriously compromised. There were budgetary constraints. There were, skills and capacity constraints. The morale of the NPA was extremely low for all the reasons that I mentioned. And, I can deal with what we've done to turn things around. But what I can say is, and also, I've been reflecting on what we've done in the past, 6 years, and also asked myself the question, how well have we done as the prosecuting authority? And let me say that, when I took office, the idea was, firstly, we have to deal with state capture related matters urgently. Secondly, we have to capacitate the NPA. We've got to bring it back to being an institution that the people can have confidence in to do the right thing always. And so what I can say is that we have certainly turned the NPA around in terms of building an institution. There's still work to be done, but building an institution that has got the capacity and skills, so there's lots of work, that has the budget that it needs to ensure that we are able to recruit the necessary skills and ensure that the trainings, etc., happen. We've looked at all of these aspects very, very carefully, and we've built, we stabilized leadership, we've built a solid foundation. So I can say that I'm very, very confident that the NPA of today is not the NPA of 6 years ago.
What does that look like in terms of the infrastructure to go against crime? My understanding of it, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that you have more generalized prosecution work stream than you have specialized units within the NPA. How's that looking in terms of capacity at leadership level, but also at the level of skill and expertise for the coalface, the prosecutors that are carrying out these prosecutions? So,
we did a capability review process, and that has been guiding us in terms of where the gaps are. But what I should say is that our reviews have shown that we have extremely highly skilled prosecutors in terms of dealing with matters like murders, rapes, robberies, which sadly are everyday crimes in South Africa. Prosecutors are very skilled, and we have a very low attrition rate. So they do remain those that, so we've got a lot of skills there, but we lack those specialized skills in terms of prosecutors being able to prosecute complex corruption, commercial crime, and also the necessary capabilities that we need to deal with the evolving nature of evidence, which today is primarily on devices, digital devices. So we have been working on, making sure our budget has been increased by about 25% over this period. Our staff capacity has also been increased by about that percentage. So we've certainly been bringing in a lot more capacity, but we've been investing a lot in trying to also upskill prosecutors in those specialized areas. And I should say that, looking back at, how far we've come, I have to say that in the area of dealing with those very, high-level, complicated corruption matters, we're not really where we need to be. So, and there's reasons for that which we can talk about.
And you touch on it briefly. What makes these matters complex? How are they different from your day-to-day? The prosecutor knows that this person is charged with this crime. These are the elements that I need to prove to get a conviction, and this is how I gauge whether I have enough evidence or not. What makes these issues we are talking about, serious commercial crimes, organized crime, some of them involving mutual legal assistance and the likes, digital forensics and the likes. What makes it more complex?
So, you know, you've hit on the nail there. I mean, the complexity is at so many different levels. I mean, to start off with, you know, it is very often transnational. So it spans, you know, different boundaries, and we need to then invoke mutual legal assistance mechanisms to deal with them. You know, when corruption itself, one might say the crime is not complex in that prosecutors know what corruption is, what are the elements, what you need to prove. But the ability to prove it and gather the evidence is where the complexity is, because of, you know, the fact that it's often transnational, because of the fact that when people want to hide money, they do it in very, very complex schemes that involve layering and different shelf companies, etc., that makes this much more difficult for us to investigate. The fact that a lot of, you know, digital analysis, forensic analysis, these capabilities are necessary and expensive. And also the fact that you're dealing with, you know, people that are, you know, from high-profile politicians to business people with very deep pockets, you know, to senior members people in government. And so, you know, just the profile of the type of people that you're dealing with also adds another level of complexity. So, you know, and having these capabilities, skills, etc., and the ability to get all the evidence together is what makes it really complex.
Is your work made more complex then, ma'am, by the fact that not only do you have a prosecutorial mandate, but now you are having to back it up and layer it with an investigative mandate, with the result, for example, that in conversations about when South Africans see the SIU, for example, doing work, doing asset recoveries and asset freezes and the likes, using the special tribunal, making recommendations to you, there's always that question that says, what's the difficulty then with the NPA? Is that investigative mandate part of the reason that your work has become even more complex?
Certainly that is, I wouldn't say it's made it more complex. We're hoping that it'll make it easier, actually, in the longer term. And just to say that in terms of the Prevention of Organized Crime Act, POCA Act, the NPA and the National Director is the only entity that is authorized to do asset recovery in South Africa. And that is why you'll be hearing about the work that the NPA is doing in terms of asset recovery. But the ability, what the SIU has is, firstly, the head of the SIU is the accounting officer of the SIU, which is not the case with the NPA. The National Director is not the accounting officer. So you have to go to the department and the DG to approve lots of things.
Yeah.
I can go into detail there if you want. The second thing is that the SIU has an investigative capacity, which makes it easier for them, which, as I said, hopefully will make it easier for us. But the SIU also has a different salary dispensation, which makes it easier for them to recruit skills at a higher level, salary level, which the NPA does not have. So we are bound by public service salary levels, which cannot compete with, forget about private sector, with even those within government, like the SIU, like SARS, who are able to hire our people after we've trained them and offer them significantly higher. I'm not saying people leave always for that reason, but that is a huge challenge that we're facing in government. And the IDAC now, although it will have the investigative capacity, we still bound by public service salary scales. So we have been doing lots of things in these areas to try to allow the NPA to be able to, offer better salaries, to be able to, well, the issue of the accounting officers, the NPA, is something we've been pushing in Parliament. We've raised that with previous ministers, with Minister Lamola as well as the current minister, and there seems to be support for it. Certainly the current minister has publicly indicated that she supports it and will move with this process. But for some reason, it just doesn't move fast enough.
Yeah. Speaking of the IDAC, that's the Investigative Directorate Against Corruption. It was previously known as the ID. And the way I understand it, it was coming in to plug a gap that had been left with the dismantling of the DSO, that whole approach of prosecutor-guided investigation capacity. How's that looking? You've been at it for at least a year now, in as far as the substantively established IDAC. How's that looking in terms of capacity and getting it to hit the ground running, as well as the cases that they are working on?
So just to explain the difference between prosecutor-led investigations and prosecutor-guided investigations. So the prosecutor-guided investigation model is one that still persists, and it's the one where the police
it's every day.
and the SCCU, which is our Specialized Commercial Crimes Unit, work in a way where the prosecutors guide, but the police are separate, investigators, the NPA is separate. Prosecutor-led is where they come under one umbrella, like the previous DSO.
Yeah.
And that is the model that the current IDAC, is built on. So in the prosecutor-led model, of course, I mean, we forget that the IDAC was only made permanent a year ago. But we have been on a very aggressive recruitment, process to make sure that we get the necessary criminal investigators, forensic investigators, and prosecutors to do this work. But we've also, in terms of the presidential initiative, recently we have engaging with business. A digital evidence unit has been set up, which will provide services to the IDAC that will deal specifically with dealing with the digital evidence, an analysis of the data and the digital evidence, which we are hoping will be an absolute game changer. It just started its work about 2 or 3 months ago. And this potentially will enhance the capacity of the IDAC to do its work greatly. So,
When you were talking to Scopa a few months ago, I think it was in June, you were outlining the number of cases that the IDAC is dealing with. And I think at that point, the number you gave was 10. Someone might ask, it seems like a low number. At what point do we ramp up and pile on more for the IDAC to do?
No, it's certainly not 10. The number of cases that the IDAC has enrolled is close to 35 at the moment. The number of accused and entities that are before court as a result of IDAC matters is over 300 at the moment. So, if one considers where the IDAC has started and the profiles of the persons that are in court at the moment are by no means small fish, as the narrative is often. If you look at some of the key Gupta lieutenants are in court, Anuj Singh, Siyabonga Gama, Brian Molefe. These are people that worked, as I said, key Gupta lieutenants. They are in court at the moment, in addition to, Regiment's Capital as an entity, Niven Pillay, Woods has been, and so we've been trying to also extradite people. So these are key people, but the court processes often just take very long for these cases to reach a finality, and that is why it's equally frustrating for us that even after people have been arrested and are in court, it takes long for the matter to be finalized.
Yeah. As a parting shot, could you talk to when you started out, the narrative was, and I don't know if it came from you at all, I can't remember, people in orange overalls. You remember that?
I remember the narrative. It didn't come from me, but certainly that was what the country was crying for.
Crying for, yes. Just as you reflect then, many people feeling the sense that we're not seeing high-profile individuals standing trial. The feeling that state capture commission related work is slow in terms of gaining momentum and the prosecutions. And I know the cases you just mentioned now. How would you respond to people who say you've not really delivered on that whether it came from you or not,
Sure.
people in orange overalls?
So no, look, when I started, I said, I reflect on what we've done in the NPA and all of the things that we've done to rebuild, etc. The one thing I have to agree on with the people is that we have not been able to move as quickly as we would like to in terms of holding people accountable for state capture. And there are various reasons for this. And the one is obviously the complexity that we talked about. And I think we must not forget that the work of the NPA in terms of rebuilding and holding people accountable for state capture only really started in 2021 when we had a full leadership in place trying to rebuild a broken institution. I think one of the maybe looking back, one of the things that we should have done differently is we tried to repair a plane in flight, as they say. So I came in and we created expectations that we didn't realize how difficult it's going to be to meet them, because we were fixing a broken plane whilst we're flying. And maybe we should have landed the plane, understood exactly what are the problems with this, and then properly fix it and then take off again. But how long would that have taken? In a climate where the people were so hungry, and so was I as the national director and as a citizen, determined to make sure that those who brought our country to its knees are held accountable.
Yeah.
And so that is what we tried to do. And maybe we created unrealistic expectations. So, the IDAC was, limping along. It was the ID at the time, and the complexity of trying to get the DPCI investigators, capacity from other places in government that are all already themselves weakened. It was almost impossible to do anything at that point to deal with it because of all the complexities and all of the challenges within the NPA and the system. So now we better understand it. We know what needs to be done. And so the IDAC was the first thing that we worked really hard on in making that a permanent entity. Now the capacitation is happening. There are cases in court. And so, I can understand the frustrations because I feel it myself, and it is. So I'm certainly hoping now, with us better understanding what exactly are the problems with this plane, we are fixing it. In terms of the IDAC being permanent, capacities, capabilities, all of that, but we're still not quite there because there are so many challenges in the criminal justice system itself that needs to be fixed before we can really move things speedily through the system. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
I know I said that was my last question, but I feel I need to ask you also about other complex matters that have to do with other crimes outside of your state capture and serious commercial crimes and the likes. Things such as racketeering, the work of syndicates, that's really in the spotlight at the moment. How's that capacity looking to deal with that in terms of, organized crime, gangsters, and racketeering? My understanding is that there's quite a high level of complexity there as well, including the fact that for racketeering, it all has to come to you to authorize for that prosecution to happen. How does that sit alongside the attempt to prosecute as many of the people responsible for those kinds of crimes as possible?
So no, look, those cases come with their own complexities, and I will deal with them in a moment. But I really want to emphasize that even though we're struggling with certain high-profile corruption, and because of the fact that, it's evidence abroad, MLAs, mutual legal assistance, and all of those complexities, let me say is that we have prosecuted a number of people successfully for corruption. And a number of government officials have been charged for corruption, contraventions of the Public Finance Management Act, Municipal Finance Management Act. People have been convicted, sentenced, and even in not just government officials, private sector individuals, over 1,000 of them have been prosecuted for various corrupt-related activities. So I don't want us to create the impression that because we don't have those key state capture, protagonists accountable yet, that nothing's happening in terms of trying to deal with corruption. A lot of work has happened already. But on the issue of organized crime and, racketeering cases, etc., let me say that this is probably one of the biggest challenges our country is facing at the moment. In order to properly fight organized crime, you need to have a highly effective police component to start off with. Within the police, you need to have a competent and effective crime intelligence capacity. That is the only way you get to the bottom of organized criminals. Who are the kingpins? In order to get to the kingpins, you need to make sure you follow the money. They don't get their hands dirty. It has to be about financial investigations. Now, those capacities and capabilities, I don't know how to be polite about this, but there's work happening in terms of, but unless we fix all of those things in our country, we are facing a serious problem with that aspect. And there needs to be a huge we can't tinker. There needs to be broad, massive overhaul of the intelligence capabilities, of our investigation capabilities. And we need to, I don't know, maybe you do need another Scorpion type entity to deal with organized crime as well. All I'm saying is, and even within that capability, once you create it, you've got to make sure it has all the skills, capabilities, capacities, etc. But also, it's almost incorruptible.
Yeah.
Because corruption within our ranks is also a huge problem. And, unless you clean out the system, give it all its capabilities, capacities, we are, I don't want to say fighting a losing battle, because I'm a very positive person generally.
But those elements need to be in place.
People need to understand, why do we have this crime crisis in this country? Let's answer, unless you properly answer that question, your solutions are not going to, the attempted solutions are not going to address the problem, because you're not properly analyzing and understanding that problem. As I said, it's about fixing the plane while you're flying. You need to understand what are the problems. And I think people are finding it easy to say, oh, the NPA is a problem. Carry on like that, and we will never solve the crime crisis, because the NPA of today is a solid institution that we are rebuilding. But there needs to be a lot of work that needs to happen across the entire criminal justice system.
DPP, I've got to thank you for that. That's the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batohi, just giving us the outline of the state of play within the organization, the National Director, the National Prosecuting Authority, the NPA. In a moment, I'm in conversation with the Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions, responsible for the Assets Forfeiture Unit, Omar Rabaji Rasitaba, who will talk to the other element. As important as having people in orange overalls is, there are other elements of justice that are being pursued, including assets forfeiture and asset recovery. That in a moment.